Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us. We know we have a lot of folks joining us globally. So wherever you are calling in from or listening from, we're really happy that you're here. For those of you who are new this week, my name is Erin Schock. I lead global startup programs for Google Cloud. And like I said, really excited to be here with you all for today's session. Which is prototyping with Gen AI, essential patterns for building innovative applications. This is our first session of week 2. So just to orient everyone, I know we probably have some return viewers and some new viewers this week. Just a few quick reminders about where we are in the agenda and the curriculum. So last week we had our first sessions. We touched on multiple AI products that can help power your businesses. This week we're moving on to prototyping solutions and scaling Gen AI. Next week, slight change in the topic, but still highly relevant, with just a deeper dive and focus on the world of big data and applications of Gemini with BigQuery. And in the fourth and final week, we have our partner takeover, which is really exciting. We have 2 program partners, Anthropic and Google DeepMind, who will be leading our sessions. So again, just a quick reminder about overall agenda and where we're at. All right, I'm going to run through a few quick housekeeping items and some reminders, and then I will hand it over to the stars of today's show, our speakers. So just bear with me for a few more minutes. So again, for those of you that are new, let's just run through the startup school structure overall. So we host live sessions of the program each Tuesday and Thursday. These are at the same time each week. Important to note, all of the sessions each week are available on demand. You can go to our landing page, you can take your time, you can rewatch. If you miss something, if you miss the session, check out the sessions on demand. These are all available just a few hours after the live session wraps. And we will also send those links in our follow-up weekly email. So there's a few ways for you guys to access. The other things to note about Startup School is we use Cloud Skills Boost. So we provide recommended labs in order to give you access to try the technologies and solutions that our speakers are presenting on and speaking about. Cloud Skills Boost gives you access to these labs for free. It allows you to practice with guidance. And the link provided in number 2 is the full list of labs to check out and review and complete if you wish and have the time. And just a fun quick note, you can obtain and earn skills badges through this when you complete certain labs and courses in Cloud Skills Boost. So just a fun note for those of you who might be competitive or looking for some badges. All right, let's move on to some more details on Cloud Skills Boost. So as mentioned, we're using practical labs as a key component of this overall training program. You can access these labs free of charge, but you do need to fuel your account with credits on the platform. So everyone should have received instructions by email on how to activate and top up your account with those credits. You will have a unique code to do that. For those of you who recently registered or just haven't done this yet, you can scan the QR code that you see on your screen right now to activate your account and redeem your credits. Also in the first bullet point on this slide, you can also go to the link, so QR code or the link work. If you have any questions about this or you need assistance with the redemption, please contact support@quicklabs.com. We have also added this to the chat space that you're seeing on the right-hand side of your screen. So speaking of chat space, let's run through the last few housekeeping items. So as you can see on your screen now, there is the chat function that I just mentioned on the right-hand side. There's also a Q&A panel at the bottom. So we have Google Cloud and Google AI experts on hand to answer any questions that come up throughout the class. So please ask your questions in either of those spaces. We do save the last 10 minutes or so for live Q&A with our instructors. We will select the most commonly asked questions and those that relate directly to the content that's covered today. You do have the ability to upvote questions in the Q&A panel and you can use the chat space to converse with other participants. Quick reminder, we record each class. You'll be able to watch them back on demand at a later stage, and you can access those recordings in our main program page. Unfortunately, we won't be sharing slides, but we do share the links to all the labs covered in class, both during the class in the chat and QA panel, and also in our weekly recap emails. And finally, you can also find the list on the resources tab on our main website. So again, lots of places for you to access whatever you might need. Last but not least, this is a hands-on training series. Most classes cover a lab. Again, if you have any issues with the Cloud Skills Boost platform, please let us know, reach out to the team. Again, we'll send all those links and details in the chat space in the Q&A as a reminder. All right, so that's it from me for now. I'm super excited to invite our two speakers today, Christian and Zachary, to our virtual stage to lead the class. And I will see everyone later for the Q&A section.
Hi. Well, I heard we have an introduction that, Christian, you created that, right?
Yes.
If we can see
Hello, everyone. Yes.
Yeah. Hopefully you hear audio.
All right, folks, settle in, grab your coffee or your wine. No judgment here. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Thanks for braving the digital wilderness to be here. Today, we have two very special customer engineers joining us. Zachary Thorman, a specialist in AIML within the public sector, and Christian Ruiz, a specialist in data analytics within the startup space. Zachary is a brilliant mind who can make even the most complex AI concepts seem easy to understand and build. He's also a bit of a goofball, so don't be surprised if he cracks a few jokes during the presentation. Meanwhile, Christian is a data whiz who can help any startup make sense of their data. He's also a great guy to have a coffee with, so if you ever get the chance, be sure to invite him to get his 5th cup of the day. So, without further ado, please welcome Zachary and Christian.
I love that. Christian, did you write that?
No, actually, I used Gemini, yeah.
Oh, okay, of course you did. So you had Gemini create it for you?
Yeah, and it was actually pretty accurate. I do love coffee.
So did you put in that I'm a goofball? In all fairness, I actually am quite a goofball.
I did not. It was actually pretty accurate from the get-go. It was really surprising.
Fair enough. On that same point of having AI kind of speed up, even creating our intro, literally, this is our intro. The same idea is applied to what we're going to be doing today. Our whole objective for today, if I click there, is to help everyone here learn how to leverage Google AI in your startup lifecycle. It could be in your daily lives. And hopefully over this next hour, you're going to go on a journey with us to be able to create a startup from, and well, actually this will be more of accelerating a startup from start to finish, from the start with LLC filings all the way to the end of creating a really cool app that maybe you guys will be able to even try by the end of this, and learning how AI helped us make this all feasible. One quick note on today is it's going to be a relatively fun session. It should be very engaging, but hopefully you can kind of imagine yourselves and put this into your own shoes of how you can apply these teachings to yourselves. Or if you're doing a startup, maybe if you're just doing something around the house or menial tasks throughout the day, I want you to take the technology and try to apply it to yourself. Maybe if it's just a simple use case or something small. So with that said, we're going to get into a little bit of a background, a little story. So about 3 weeks ago, I was in the grocery store. Well, it was the farmer's market, but my wife and I were going to the farmer's market, and she normally does all the shopping for me because, God bless me, I really can't pick a fruit worth anything. But today was a special occasion because she decided to task me with doing half of the grocery list. So you can see a little bit of them written there, but don't worry, there was more things. But I got the half of the list that she gave me, and I looked in and I saw, okay, shallots. I don't know what shallots are. So I Google it and it says onions. So I'm like, great, onions. And I see green onions. I Google that and it says, well, it's just onion. So, okay, I have twice onion. And then it just says onion for a third time. So I'm utterly lost, but I spent about 20 minutes, and yes, it did actually take me probably 20 minutes to find shallots, find green onions, and onions. So I just have 3 variations of onions already. And then I go and look for eggplants. And if it isn't obvious at this point, I am not in the grocery store very often. I don't know how to pick good produce. So without doing this on purpose, I picked the single worst. Like, this is not an actual photo of it, but I picked the single worst eggplant you could possibly pick. And I brought it to my wife, so proud. Like, I love you, honey. This is my representation of my love. And little did I know, I actually was supposed to get Chinese eggplant, so I had to go back anyways. But when I did, I wanted to get something correct for a first time. And I Google searched, how do you pick a Chinese eggplant? And that's when I saw it tell me, okay, you should look for a nice purple hue. It should be firm to the touch. It should be shiny. And that's when it hit me. If this is such an issue for me, then it must be an issue for many other people out there. So I immediately called up my buddy Christian and I said, let's build out this idea. Let's create a company. Let's create our startup about how to be able to kind of pick the best produce at the grocery store. And after about an hour, and in all fairness, this is the longest part of every startup, we came up with our name. We wanted to call it cherrypick.ai. Yeah, so we're like cherry picking out the best fruit. It is a pun on words, and it literally did take, it might have been longer than an hour. But this is the start of our startup. And over this next hour, you're going to see us build it all out from start to finish and kind of tell you about the lessons we learned along the way and the technology we use and how to use it for yourselves. So let's start with our favorite thing of every LLC, paperwork. So I'm going to start by legitimately just going to Gemini and asking it, because I am new to it. Christian, we are just getting started with this, but I'm going to ask how, let's say, how do I create an LLC in Georgia? I am in Georgia right now. And Christian, can you see this good enough?
Yeah, pretty good.
Hi. Sweet. So first we have to choose a name. We did that, luckily. It took a while, but we did pick a name. We have to appoint a registered agent. I don't know what that is. So what is a registered agent? I'm just going to say TLDR. Oh, there's a lot of other information. Let's see. TLDR, registered agent, is like your business official's mailroom for importantly. Okay, mailroom. All right, so I can probably put myself for that then. So appoint a registered agent. A registered agent is a person or entity authorized to receive legal documents on your behalf. Physical address. I do have a physical address in Georgia. That is where I am right now. Filing something. File your articles of organization. Let's see. And if you click on this, it tells us different information that it pulled and sourced it from. So it's all grounded in truth. But I see register an LLC with Georgia. That's great. I'm trying to create a startup as fast as possible. So I'm going to click on that. Oh, share screen. And it takes me to here and create and file registration. Oh, I'm a traditional folk, so I like doing things by mail. So I'm going to register by mail. And
hey, didn't you say you were like friends with your mailman?
Right? I am friends with my mailman.
True. Yeah.
I live in an apartment complex, so I know the people who come in every time. But I'm going to go ahead and click on this. And then I'm going to control find, search for that document. Yep. And I'm going to, there we go. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and download this file. Let me download it. Sweet. And now I'm going to actually open up a new chat back in Gemini. And I already wrote out what I wanted to say because I'm very slow at typing, as you will notice. But how would you fill out this form given that our LLC name is cherrypicker.ai and we want to file our LLC as soon as possible? I'm going to provide it the file I just downloaded, the articles of organization. I'm going to attach that. I'm just going to send it off. So what it's going to be doing right now is it's going to be reading through the entire document. And it's already giving us answers because the second I saw this document, which it might be hard to see, that's a lot of legal terms. And of course, I recommend for everyone to actually, if you're doing this, contact a lawyer, follow those steps, make sure that everything is approved. But I can go ahead and see article on here. Article 1, it recommends that I put in cherrypick.ai for the name. Article 2, it recommends, check the first box. I gotcha. And then write my signature. So if I look at here, I could write my name as cherrypicker.ai. Check the first box, And then I guess I'll have to print it out to write my name. It also has something about capacity, which I don't know. So I'm going to go back here, and it might have already told me, but what does capacity mean? Because I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not giving any legal advice during the session. In the context of this form, capacity refers to the official role or designation. Signer must indicate which. Okay. So I'm an organizer. So here I would probably just check as I just did, check organizer. I do believe when I was on this page, it said there's a few other things I need to do, like download the transmittal form, which I'm pretty sure that that Gemini will be able to help me fill out this document too and submit it. But I think we got it down for our paperwork, right? Would you agree, Christian? I think that's all the paperwork we need to do. Just do those two ones. I could show Gemini doing the same thing, but I think I got a handle on it. So I'm going to finish filing the paperwork right now. Christian, can you take over from now?
Yeah, of course. All right. So now where we might get started is earlier we saw that we had basically we were trying to pick out, we picked out our name, cherrypicker.ai, which was nice. And earlier you saw that we had like a little moving cherry, but that wasn't actually our official logo, right? So we said like, okay, how can we leverage AI in this case to come up with a cool logo that then we can easily edit across, building our app and different needs across our app, right? So here's where we came across Imogen, right? And before I go into the actual console and show a little bit on how we used Imogen for creating our logo, I want to share with the audience here like a few like key points or TLDR on how to prompt Imogen, right? So these best practices basically help you get at least decent results with these models. And for example, long sentences may actually confuse these generative models. So we always recommend keep your prompts as brief as you can. So again, this is for image creation models, so text to image, not necessarily the consumer side of models like Gemini. So when you want to structure your prompt, right, you want to have very short sentences, keep them brief, and also you want to have very specific keywords, right? So when you're thinking about an image, sometimes you have to think about all the different styles that can be present in the image. So for example, fashion photography could be a style, 3D rendering, right? Or even a cartoon, for example. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But then after you've kept it brief and simple, you can actually start incrementally adding to the prompt to balance the different keywords and see how it actually comes up with the image. So as an example here, right, this is a short prompt, but it has very particularly like a good structure that helps the model understand what you're trying to get out of it, right? So at first you can see that we started with the image style. So it's a close-up photo. So now you're thinking, okay, the model is saying this has to be something that is zoomed in on a subject, for example, right? And then it's saying, okay, of a woman in her 20s, right? Okay, so we need a woman in the subject as the subject, and then street photography. So this is giving a little bit of context to the model as to what appears to be in the background. So in this case, the background might be like a busy street, right? And then we have a camera. So like which camera actually took the photo if we're talking about a close-up photo. And then keywords like movie still is like, okay, how can we add a little bit of dramatic effect to the photo? And then lastly, you can think about ambience. So like what are the color tones or what are the color grading that has the photo once it's all generated? So you can think of like the journey of the image and the model trying to understand, okay, what are the different edits or different components I should be adding as I go through the actual prompt, right? So that's a little bit of a TLDR of what are like the best practices when prompting a model like Gemini. But if we go over to the Google Cloud Console, right, how can we start working with a model like Imogen? So within Google Cloud, we have a product called Vertex AI. So a few of folks might already have come across Vertex AI before, but a TLDR is Vertex AI is one of the products within Google Cloud Platform that allows machine learning developers, data scientists, data engineers to take their projects from ideation to deployment, right? So how fast and how quickly, how cost effective do you want to be with these different tools is where Vertex AI is the place to do it. So within Vertex AI, you have the studio. So here's where you can actually fine tune and work with these generative AI models. You have the model garden where you can explore different first party and third party and even open source models. You have Colab enterprises. So for those folks that have been in other sessions, working with Colab, you already know a little bit about this. Those that have worked with Python notebooks, Jupyter notebooks, this is where you would start working with that. And then lastly, on the more standard or the more typical machine learning operation side of things, or MLOps, right? You have preparing your data, model development, and then deploying and using these models. So all of these features are built into Vertex AI. And here on the left, you can actually see all across all these tabs that you can access all of these features, right? But for today's session, we're going to go into like Vertex AI Studio within the Vision tab. So here's where you can actually start working with imaging models, right? So right now, I do have access to the latest Imagen 3 model. This is still in its early days, right? But I believe it's in either public or private preview. But once it's generally available, you are going to start seeing this in your own console. And for the purpose of today, I want to create a logo for our startup, right? And so when I was discussing this with Zach, we were like, okay, so the pun is actually pretty funny, cherry picker. So why not have a logo that is actually a cherry? And if we want to keep it fun, let's actually think about what kind of cherry does it make sense to put in as a logo. And I said, okay, why not we do a cartoon? So I gave it the following prompt. And let me zoom in for those folks that the text might be a little bit small there so that you can see the prompt. All right. Zoom out a little bit there. And then, so I wrote a single cherry cartoon, right? So why did I put a single cherry? As I was prompting, right, I figured out, okay, if I only put cherry, for some reason, the model takes into consider that a cherry is like two cherries together tied by, it's not. So I had to specify a single cherry so that it only creates one. And I want it to be a cartoon style with cartoon eyes, cartoon hands with white gloves specifically. And then I wanted to also have red shoes. So let's see how that does it with Imagen 3. Give it a run. Zoom out.
I know we already found one we liked, but hey, we might have to change it quickly if these are really good.
Exactly.
I'm personally fond of the one we picked that everyone will get to see shortly.
Exactly. So here you go. You see, that's pretty good results, right? It understood all of them have red shoes, white gloves. It's a cherry. It has like a cartoon face, a little bit of greenery on the top. That's actually pretty nice, right? So from this tool, not only can you edit the image, right? Generate videos, verify the digital footprint or blueprint inside of these generative AI images. You can also just click on the one you like. So for example, let's say I like this one, and then you can upscale and export the image from here. You can select the image. And one thing we found very cool, and you'll see now when I get back to the slides, is that you can actually select what part of the image you want to actually edit. So if I wanted to edit, for example, the hands right here, and I wanted to do something in particular, I write a prompt so that it changes the hands, right? And you can see the different modes we have. And one thing I like for the audience to notice is that now we changed to Imagen 2, right? So all of these models are still under development. So when it comes to the different capabilities, you might see that it switches back to Imagen 2 or switches back to Imagen 3, or once everything is settled in Imagen 3, so that's going to be like the standard model across the different modes and different actions you can take with these models in Vision. So that's a little bit of rundown, right? And I want to show quickly the end results of how we explored using Vision and coming up with a logo for our startup. So everything started with the initial prompt, very, very simple prompt. We went very, zero shot type of prompt, generate a cartoon logo only using one cherry. That sounds super simple, right? But it actually gave pretty good results. And the left picture, the one on the left circled, is one of the 4 images that was generated. And Zach and I were both like, wait a minute, that actually looks pretty cool and decent, right? So we were like, okay, let's select that one. But then as we were, exploring and building our web app, we're like, okay, we need a little bit more sort of like different iterations of the logo. So how can we fix this, right? And then we went into editing the image. We selected it and said, okay, add white gloves, right? And then we said, oh, I also want the cherry to be pointing, upwards, and that's the logo on the right. And then we were like, okay, what if we need an action where it's like approving, right? So like thumbs up. And then we kept adding or prompting it in the edit image portion, and it actually did pretty decently. Like all different iterations of the images were on par with what we wanted the model to do at the end of the day. So we selected these three images. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I just realized we went through this entire process and we never named our logo. It's a cartoon character and we never named it. This is not set up. There's no ending to it. Like, if anyone has good comments at the end of this, please comment because we did not know.
Name. Yeah. That's true. That's true. Definitely. All right. So now that we created the logo, right? Just wanted to end this session, like this part of the session, as when you're thinking about using all these models, you have to think about the different ways you interact with the different data you're actually giving the model, right? So earlier you saw that Zach was working with documents and text, right? So you were most of it was text to text with Gemini, right? In the session I just gave, I was working with text to image. So you can not only think about all the different types of ways you can interact with these models, but the multimodality. So how can you combine all of these to make or generate specific content or specific results that you're looking for your startup? Even at the beginning, you saw that we started our introductions with speech. So we gave text and we generated speech, right? So there's many ways all this data can actually interact with these models. And we're always excited to see how our customers and how the different users make all these data points interact with each other. So
Christian, can I actually jump in?
Yeah.
So I actually just finished filing all the paperwork. I just mailed it. I know everyone.
Amazing.
Everyone might have been watching me like, wait, I didn't see him sign any paper. Don't worry, it was all down here. I already passed to my mailman. My mailman's in the next room across.
Amazing! Wow. So now we just wait. Yeah.
I just had a realization that we went this far into our startup, and if you can pull up my slides.
Yeah.
We just went this far. There we go. If we just went this far into our app development, our startup creation, and we didn't even check if this is actually feasible.
That's true.
Step one should have been, okay, wait, is this actually possible with the technology? So backtracking a bit, let's look and see if this is actually possible. So I'm going to go to Google Cloud again. And now that we're kind of getting into our environment of we're building our startup, we're building our code that might be used. And again, this might be for investors in the future. They might be wanting it. We want to make sure that everything we do from this point on is in a secure enterprise environment. So unlike using the Gemini consumer, I'm going to be working and utilizing Google Cloud Platform, where I know all the code I create, all the content and information that I give it is proprietary and it remains in my isolated tenant in Google Cloud. But I'm going to go to Freeform. Let me zoom out a little bit. And I'm just going to quickly ask, is this a good fruit? And I have a picture of a dragon fruit because, again, I don't know what these are supposed to be. So if everyone wants to see the photo, I don't know if this is a good dragon fruit or a bad dragon fruit, but let's find out. It should I'm imagining it'll give me a rating. It'll give me 5 stars. This dragon fruit also, whether it's good or subjective, depends on personal preference. Okay, this is not what I want. And to that point, you might hear that a lot when you're playing with LLCs. Oh, this isn't what I was wanting. Oh, this is not what I was expecting for output. Just like drawing and creating images like that cherry picker is an art, there's ways to ask questions to AI. There's ways to prompt it. There's an art to prompting. So when we are trying to, let me delete that photo. When we're trying to get a good response out of an LLM or a large language model, aka these chatbots that are taking over the world, you want to come up with a somewhat semi-structure of how you approach it. You want to potentially start with kind of putting it into the zone of an actor. You want to say you are a gardenist or you are a master judge. Give it the context to run in. Give it its persona. Then you can start giving it all its context. You can say, this is the type of thing that you're going to be receiving. Maybe start listing out using chain of thought what criteria to judge based on, what to be able to determine if it's good or not. Then afterwards, you can maybe state the information you need to receive, and then the output, desired outputs that can come out. So that would be saying maybe an example, this is how I'm expecting it to output. And by just doing those few things, you're going to get a much better response. So I'm going to paste in a prompt that I actually had Gemini help me write, because again, I do not have the time to write out one on my own, just like the earlier speech to the script. So I had it help me prompt to Gemini 1.5. I literally just asked Gemini, can you help me prompt for Gemini? And it surprisingly turned out well. And you can start seeing the characteristics of what I just mentioned. You are a reasonable, hopefully it's close enough for everyone to be able to see, but you are a reasonable judge with deep knowledge of fruits and vegetable quality. Your task is to develop a rating for selected produce. And then it goes through and highlights a few things. It should focus on quality. It should focus on freshness. It should really take an emphasis on the absence of defects. Based on these criteria, develop a star rating. Additionally, add some pros and cons. And I also added a sneaky little thing here. But I'm not even going to read it out. So if anyone wants to see it later, if you read that quickly, you'll understand. If you didn't read it, you'll see it later. But I'm going to go ahead and just add this photo again. So let me upload the image and just have it run again. Now, compared to the previous response, I should get a lot more quality response. Here's my assessment of the dragon fruit. Quality, 3 stars. Ooh, it's a tough judge. Freshness is 3 stars. And absence at 2.5 stars. By the way, this is out of 5. So I'm guessing, I think, overall rating, 2.5 stars. That is 100% my prompting. Oh my gosh, I made a foodie, or I made quite a food critic. But it's good enough because we're startups and we're scrappy. So we're going to take this and we're going to stick our sassy food critic into our app. I think that's a good enough test that this will work. So now let's look at the next step of kind of an LLC. So we have determined, I think, Christian, would you say that's good enough for us to keep moving forward?
Yeah, pretty sure. We can dive in.
So is this feasible? Yes. We have our foodie, our food critic. Next step on our process is we're going to build the app. Now, just giving a note here, what Christian and I did, and this is legitimately true, and I use the word legitimately, non-ironically, but we decided to take 24 hours. So over this weekend, we took 24 hours to build this app, and then we just stopped after that. So there is legitimately features in this app that you will see that are not finished, or I would say, oh, I would love to get to that, but I did not have the time. And the reason why we cut ourselves off at 24 hours is the whole premise of this session is to understand that, yes, I could have built an app without AI, but can I do it much, much faster with the help of AI? Every single step of the process, we were asking Gemini to either create our code, help debug our code, help create the front end, help us understand how to write front end. All of these questions were a constant conversation with these chatbots to see what would have taken us probably months of app development or weeks, depending on how good of an app developer you are and how good you are with front end and back end, into what can we do in truly just 24 hours. So when I went through it, let's start thinking about the back end. This is my thought process. Hang with me, Christian. So I know we want to start. I'm just going to put a start up there. Every good flow diagram starts with big old box that says start. And I know I want to analyze a photo. I want to analyze an image coming in from the end users. And there's probably like 3 different approaches that we can take. We can either get a photo that's just something random entirely. It could just be a random image of a street corner, not produce. So we want to watch for that. We could get a single produce, like a single picture of a fruit or a veggie. That's what we're kind of our desired outcome. But we could also get a picture of multiple fruits. So we want to account for that. Maybe we should implement some logic to be able to pick the best fruit from that and draw a box around it. So, first we want to check, is it produce? Yeah. If it is produce, if it is a fruit or a veggie, then we want to do one of these 3 things. It's either a random image, a single picture of a fruit or veggie, or a picture of lots of fruits and veggies. And depending on that, it's going to have a different flow. So for a random image, we probably want the user to resubmit, provide a new photo. If it's single produce, that's when we want to use that prompt I just showed you to determine its quality. And if it's a bulk produce, I want to call Gemini. And actually, I haven't tested the logic, but you know what? It'll probably work, foreshadowing a bit in our development. But let's have Gemini just draw a bounding box for us and give its reasoning on which one it thinks of all the fruits it sees, or veggies it sees, which one's the best. And then pass it over to Python to just draw a bounding box or image into. And then I want to pack that all into a JSON for Christian and send that back to the end user. So that's pretty much everything I think we need. I feel like I'm forgetting something here, but it'll come back to me later. Look, we can get back to that after. But Christian, do you want to start us off with kind of the front end?
You can go to the next slide. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can go to the next slide. So when we were exploring this, right, and we gave ourselves the challenge of, okay, we need to do this under 24 hours cumulatively, right? And we need to make sure that we can collaborate, that we can work both on the front end code and the back end code, where we can use Gemini, and we can have, like, if we were to, let's say, push this into Google Cloud Platform, right? We need fast integrations with all these tools. So we were exploring, we were debating, okay, what type of IDE we want to use and stuff like that. And we came across one of our internal projects called Project IDX. So Project IDX is still in beta, right? For those that have seen it, that's awesome. But those that haven't, Project IDX is actually a complete developer workspace that lives in your browser for different app development teams all across the world, right? Where you can actually have access to all of this in a collaborative space. So you can work all together within the same IDE. And I know that we have tools like GitHub for version control, and that helps out a lot when it comes to collaboration. So that still exists in there. For those folks that have used Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, this will actually look very, very similar. It's built on the same, idea. And the thing that differentiates Project IDX is the closely and tightly, integrations with Google Cloud. And also it's powered by Google Cloud. So we can jump straight into Project IDX here. We can change slide. All right. So within Project IDX, once you've signed up, right, you, again, first disclaimer, this is still in beta. But when you're in Project IDX, you can go through some basic news, basic introductions, release notes of what's going on with the project. Also, when you want to create a specific workspace, you don't have to start from scratch. There's many templates, as you can see here, that go across creating a web app, creating a backend specifically, creating mobile applications. If you're somebody that just wants to develop AI ML or work with databases, or you have a particular solution in mind, right? You can try things out and explore all of these tools and boilerplate code without spending too much time on what you actually want to or too much time coding and trying to get a quick start, right? So for our specific case, we thought, okay, if we want to leverage Gemini, we need to access to the Gemini app. And I asked Zach, hey, what backend are you comfortable with? And both of us were like, yeah, Flask. We have to build this with Python Flask. So we were like, okay, if we want to leverage both of them, is there any particular way of doing it here? And there actually is. So we can see here that there's Gemini API with Python backend. So we got lucky, right? We were like, oh my God, there's already a template for us. That's amazing. So when you go here, oh, apologies, this is not the actual right one. Here or this one. Yeah, there we go. So when you go into the Gemini API specifically, you can actually see that you can choose the backend environment, and you have a few options. So for those that love JavaScript, you have an option for that. You also have for Go and a Python notebook, or even Python Flask. So let me zoom in a little bit. So for those, so you can see the options there. You can't see the options because it populates on my end, but there's 4 options that you can select here. And I'm going to select the Python web app and give it a name. So let me say we're still in the development stage. So let's tag it, dev. And for this project, we don't need LangChain, but in the future, if it's something we can need, we can pull it into the project, no problemo.
And while it creates this, add something,
yeah.
Christian. So one of the things that I also note is, why do we choose Project IDX over potentially a notebook? Because inherently, notebooks are really fun at being scrappy, quickly building it.
Mm-hmm.
But because we wanted to do something that we can both work at the same time, and have a bit more control over the entire environment, I figured that Project IDX would probably be our best bet.
Exactly. I totally agree as well. So as you can see, it's still loading here. It takes a few seconds to load and spin up the environment. It's creating all the different, it's adding all the different code into it. It's running the scripts it needs to run. It's spinning up, the virtual machine in the back end so that you can have it hosted here and live. All right. So it's a little bit zoomed in, so it might look a bit crowded. I'm going to zoom out just a tiny bit. All right. Awesome. So yeah, as you can see, it's still running a few scripts, installing all the packages and dependencies it needs, given that we told it, hey, let this be a Python Flask app plus also integrate the Gemini API. So to give it a little bit of, it also spins up a web preview. So you basically have everything here, and it might get a little bit crowded, but if we start cleaning around, right, we can actually see that we can work both with our code directly here and also preview the web app, right? And also work with the terminal. So if we need to install any more dependencies, run the commands as we build, everything is here. We don't need to leave this particular tab. There's, depending on your development style, you might want to have different tabs. It all depends. But you can do everything from here. You can even have the web console, view all the console logs. You can debug. You can output the different prints from Python directly here. If you have any problems, they can spin up here. And again, for those that have used Visual Studio Code, you can actually see that everything looks very similar, right? But as I mentioned earlier, one thing that differentiates Project IDX, again, is the close integration with Google Cloud. So from here, you can actually see that you can go directly or have quick links to documentation, support, shortcuts, and you can see the Google Cloud integration. So if you need to host this super quickly with Firebase, those that have done this know about how quickly you can set this up. But with a click of a button, you're spinning up your web app with Firebase. Or if you need to host it in Cloud Run and have the scalability and power of Cloud Run, you can do that. Add the Gemini API again. If you change your backend, you can quickly add the API. And for those more sophisticated, applications, you can add secret managers. If you're working with sensitive data, you can add the Maps platform. If you're working with different APIs and using geolocations, so lots of integration, lots of tooling within this service, right? But for the purpose of today, we wanted to create a startup as quickly as possible, under 24 hours, right? So we said, okay, we need to leverage Gemini everywhere we can. So if we start closing this down, right? One of the things we also said, because Zach was like, hey, why don't we use a front-end framework we're not familiar with to see how fast we can do it? And I'm like, okay, so on top of the 24-hour challenge we have, you want to add another challenge to it. And I'm like,
apologize, Christian.
Yeah. I said, okay, why not? By the way, I am a fan of Angular. That's my front-end background. So I was very comfortable with Angular, developing in Angular. But he was like, why don't we do Beautify? And I'm like, oh my God. Okay, interesting. Why not? Let's do it. So as you can see, let me do that again. Here on the top right, you have a little star icon that looks like the icon from Gemini, and it actually is. And you have different ways of interacting with Gemini within Project IDX. So you can select particular code in your files, and you can say, hey, explain this. You can add comments. So for those folks that don't necessarily like to document their code, you can actually leverage Gemini to help you with that. You can do anything with the selected code. So if you need to change it, or you need to add something new features, or you need to add unit tests or anything like that, you actually have a separate, tool for generating unit tests. But that's still a little bit in the experimental stage. Now you also have chatting with Gemini here on the side, and also starting an inline chat, right? So you can chat with the actual code you selected. But for this, I'm still starting off, right? I was discussing this with Zach, and I'm like, oh my God, okay, so we need to build this under 24 hours, and we need to learn a new front-end framework like Beautify. Awesome. All right. So what would be a good question to ask Gemini? So I was like, okay, I need to learn a little bit more about Beautify. Maybe it's not that far off from Angular, right? So I was like, okay, how can I create a beautified web app using Yarn? I'm a big fan of Yarn, so I specified that. I don't know if this text is big enough, but I can zoom in. And I said, okay, using Yarn within Project IDX. Okay, let me send that over to Gemini. And I was like, okay, let's see if it gives me like clear instructions on what I might need to start creating this. All right, so, all right, interesting. So if we scroll up a little bit, it's saying within your workspace, you actually need to create the app with using Yarn. You have to serve it. That's okay. Awesome. Okay, optional. You also have to identify the dev.nix file. Interesting. So when you're in Project IDX, you actually need to set up your environment if you want to use Yarn. Interesting. Okay, so I have to add this. All right. Okay, no more from there. So I guess we can start there so that we have all the packages and dependencies we need to create the Beautify app. And one thing I saw is that when you're highlighting or you're hovering over code inside of Gemini Chat, inside of Project IDX, you see a few buttons that appear here, right? So these buttons are actually amazing because one of them is like, okay, if it's a command, you can actually click run command in terminal and it'll like open up the terminal and run the command for you. Or if it's code that you actually like and agree with, you can insert it directly into the file that you have on the side. And if you don't necessarily want it to, insert the code, you can just copy it and then insert it wherever file you need to. But that actually adds to the productivity of developing an app because you can easily insert code, do anything with it, or run specific commands as you start asking it a bunch of questions as you start debugging. So in this case, I just need to install this package. So I can just like copy that right there. I don't have to copy the whole code there. And I could go into .idx, the dev here. Let me clean this up a little bit. And I can see that I don't have Yarn. Awesome. So I can just add it here. And Project IDX will actually detect changes in the file and say, okay, you've changed the dev.nix, so you have to rebuild this environment. So after rebuilding the environment is just going to take care of adding all those packages. And to be honest, the dev.nix file has a lot of different tooling you can add into it to automate the different scripts you can run as you were building. But again, the challenge is 24 hours with a new front-end framework. So we have to get this done as quickly as possible. So we need our environment to just be set up for us, ready to code. And while that spins up, I just wanted to show you the folks here that if we go into templates, you don't necessarily have to go with the way we did, which is start from Gemini and Flask app. You can go into the different templates here, and you can even search like Vue, right? So like if you already are a fan of Vue, here you go. There's a template for Vue. You can search it up to see if there's a template for you, and you can start building separately. Our approach was like we need to build front end and back end in the same project, right? Or in the same workspace. Just wanted to show that. Let's go back. All right, we have it built down here. And as you can see, when we come back, we already have Yarn installed. That's great. But we don't have our chat anymore. So if you click the little like history button here on the top, you can actually go back into the conversation you were having or the chat you were having with Gemini previously. So up here, we see that we need to create this preset default. I actually want to go through all the steps, so I don't need to run all of that. But we can open up a terminal here on the bottom. All right. And we can say, all right, so I need to create the Beautify app, some bindings. Okay, no problem there. Create the app. All right, so we have Yarn. That's great to see. And now let me spin up so everyone can see this. We need to give it a name. So let me just, oops, there we go. Let's just name it front end. Everything will live here. I always go with recommended. I'm a big fan of TypeScript. I'm using Yarn, and I want all the dependencies to be installed. Great. So I went through all of this, right? And again, you don't have to go through all of this. You can just select the template, and then everything should be spin up for you. It'll go through all of these, different scripts and install all of the dependencies. But now it's just going to go through all of that, and we basically have a project ready to start our front end development, right? Now, I want to fast forward because, based on time, we can't show all of the process we did within the 24 hours. We might need a longer stream. But I want to fast forward into 24 hours. Like after we did this, after we communicated with Gemini, after we debugged, we came across and having this project right here. So on the side, we leveraged the web preview. We leveraged here. You can see a little bit on the. Let me close this down. You can see that we have all the different source files here. We created a layout. We can work with components. So for those folks that have used Beautify before, this is already pretty familiar with you. But for those folks that haven't, here's where we manage all the code for the front end. And we came across this project here on the right. Okay. So before I actually show anything,
yeah, I was gonna say that's the front end. So
exactly.
On the fun side, beyond that, I had to take that front end and then push it into backend land, which is where I took over. I know I gave you the tough challenge of having to build something all the way from scratch, use a brand new framework, and then I was very much in my own comfort zone with being able to use Python Flask. But if you can swap over to my screen, so we can't show you everything that we did crunching very hard in the last 24 hours to be able to create it. But I do want to highlight a few of the things that really did help us to do it. One of the things was I use inline coding a lot, where just like Christian showed earlier, being able to, he said chat with Gemini, but I use inline with Gemini, where I would ask it, let's say, create a function to receive post requests with images, because I know he's going to be sending me an image. And I would just press enter, and it would create the code for me. I don't know if I can make this a little bit bigger, but I accept it, and it would immediately create the code that I would be using as my template, getting like 60-70% of the way there. And this is actually very similar to the code I did actually end up using, because I just took this and then modified it and changed it. And also a fun thing is it's going to constantly be using all the code from your environment. So you can see app.config upload folder. It was already pulling things in from where it can't see it here, but I was setting it an upload folder later and an export folder later, or just the names and such. But that was allowing it to look at all the other code we have available to basically create a educated guess on how to write the code for specifically what you might be needing. Another thing I was using was helping me debug. So if I start the chat, if I start the chat with Gemini, one of the things I ran across, and this is just an example of, there was many things I ran into issues with as I was trying to build out and develop. But one of them was I was trying to create a pseudo front end to emulate what Christian was working on at that moment to be able to work with my real backend. And I kept running into an issue of I was creating this image or creating this method to receive images from the front end. And then all I needed to do was send them back with edits and modifications. So creating that bounding box that you'll hopefully see later for bulk images. But for some reason, all the changes I was doing, it just could not fix it. So after about 15-20 minutes of trying to debug a issue in my own code, and again, I could have highlighted the code, but for simplicity's sake, I just grabbed the exact code that was having an issue. This is the backend code that I wrote, and then this is the front end code that I wrote to test it. And I just asked, actually, where was it? What did I ask it? I asked, why is this Python? I did not ask a good prompt or anything. I was very much just irritated on why it's not working. But I asked, why is this Python Flask not returning the JSONify response? Which made sense at the time. And I just sent it the code. And after looking at it really quickly, it realized, your front end's sending a request. My front end is sending a request to return images, and I was modifying a method called return image 64. This is a good test for everyone else. Please use good nomenclature for your naming. But that legitimately was 15 to 20 minutes of sitting there and like, it's not working after no matter all the changes I'm doing. is not working. And this is the equivalent of having a peer programmer looking over your shoulder to say, hey, you're forgetting the 64 there, or hey, remove the 64 and your code will work. That was a very expensive save on our part because I didn't have time for Christian to look over my shoulder to figure out the issues. But when I was able to fully build out like this backend solution, Christian, can you show kind of what it looks like on your phone, like actually the app on your phone, what it looked like when we were able to combine both my backend that was kind of that logical flow that I showed earlier and the front end that after about 24 hours and a lot of irritation on trying to learn something new and then chatting with Gemini to learn said new thing, it was able to help create. So can we go ahead and see your app?
Of course. So here we are. So I'm actually using the iPhone mirroring here in my Mac. So if I am lagging or anything like that, please bear with us. This is still like experimental, I guess, and we might experience a few issues. But just to give it a rundown, right here, when we combined the backend and the front end, we wanted the user to upload an image. So we go here. I have lots of fruit images, lots of test sites, but let's just upload a very bad looking apple, right? So once we upload that, one of the things we also had to keep in mind is like, hey, we can only upload images, right? So we have to control that. And I asked Gemini, like, hey, how can I just accept images? And it showed me how to do it with the input DOM element from HTML, and you can just like add quick tags to it, and it'll just allow very specific file types into that into the actual web app. So as you can see here, we uploaded the apple, and we can see it gave it a rating 1 out of 5. Again, like Zach mentioned, it is a foodie, but it detected the that it was a pretty bad rating. So there's a like find fresh produce. We can go that into later, yeah. But just wanted to show.
I just had an idea of something we need on that, but here, keep going.
Yeah, so just to show the audience here, like, reason for the rating, very low freshness, major defects, pros of the produce selected is like, oh, it's still life-ending, so perfect for attracting fruit fries. So it's still in that nature of being a food critic, right? Cons of it is like, it actually helps you and teaches you what to avoid on the particular fruit it detected or the particular produce it detected, right?
Wait, Christian, before you go any farther, I realized what it was. Here, can you guys swap over to my screen again? I figured it out. I realized something was missing inherently. So every startup obviously has to go through LLC filings. Every startup has to create a cool logo, a cute little logo, which we're still looking for that name. Hopefully someone in the chat put a good name and you guys argued over the best one. If not, I'm kind of putting that into the universe for someone to create the best answer. But we went through our POC. We created our MVP. But oh God, I just realized something. Christian, I'm broke. And you're broke too, because we're a startup and we're scrappy.
We need funding,
we have no funding. So my idea, hear me out. Let's make some money and let's get some revenue into this pipeline. So, because that's something every startup's got to deal with. We got to make some money out of our app. It can't just be all butterflies and rainbows. So hear me out. We have this whole branch of analyze the photos. What if we try to introduce some sponsors? I know, Christian, you hate this as a developer, like we are adding in logic just to make money, but hear me out. I don't think it'll be too obtrusive and we can make it fun. So what if we get some marketing involved where we can get some premier partners near us and go to grocery shop? And I have a few I actually reached out to. 3 responded to me, and it just so happened that they share a few names that we might recognize. But actually, before that, this is a very complicated term or complicated box here, but do not be overwhelmed. I'm going to explain all of it in a second in very good detail. But run ChromaDB, or technically I'm going to create a RAG architecture, very fancy word. Don't worry about it. We'll get to it in a second. Use a vector database called ChromaDB. Again, we'll get to it. All makes sense for even anyone who's not familiar with all these coding terms or these technical terms. It'll all make sense shortly, but we're going to do all that fancy stuff to relate the photo that they uploaded. Which grocery store would it make sense for them to go to? So we have 3 premier partners that we've partnered with. Aiko's Acorn Market, which is actually the name of my wife, with a cute little shop. We have Carla's Apple Emporium, which is someone close to Christian. And then, Christian.
I'm selling avocados now. Interesting. Yeah.
Why didn't
side
you tell me
business.
about this?
I still, yeah, the gross
Oh
margins
my
there
God, we
are
could have
tough.
made avocados are such a bigger hit. We could make so much money with your side hustle instead of our startup.
There might be a conflict of interest, though. No,
It's too late now. It's too late now. But we're going to take the information we get back from that analyzed photo. We're going to use it to search against for relevant information in the promotional flyers that each of these partners have sent us. Pull out relevant information from each of them. And then we're going to not do that. We're going to skip this whole context validation thing because we're scrappy and we don't have any time left to develop. I told you there's going to be things we have to scrap, but we're going to ignore whatever that means, which I'm going to explain in a second. And we're going to take the information that we get back from whichever relevant chunks of information we get from either Aiko's Acorn Market, Apple Emporium, or Avocado Acres, and then use that to empower and create a personalized ad for our end users. And then we're going to send that back to the end user. And before we show that logic, I'm going to simplify down a few of the terms I just said. There were 3 main ones, but I'm going to kind of break it down. So the first thing is RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. Now, what RAG stands for, or what it means, is basically empowering your LLM or your chatbot to search elsewhere, to be able to look externally for more information. This could be looking to your documents. This could be looking through the internet, a web search. It could be looking through just general knowledge that is out there on the internet. Now, there's a fun analogy. So I want everyone to just take a breath, and I'm going to explain RAG in a very simple way that I've explained a few times before, and I really like it. So everyone imagine in your heads that you just walked up to the biggest library in the entire world. It is probably everything that's ever been said on the internet. It's in there. It is the library of the internet. It has every book ever written, every post on Reddit, everything in there. And you walk in and you see 2 librarians standing there. You see a older gentleman who's, honestly, I think he's as old as time. He's been there for literally ever. Like, he has been there since the beginning of the cat memes on the internet. He's read every single book in the entirety of the library of the internet. He's read it. He's read them front to back, back to forward. He knows every page. And then we have this younger lady who, well, she's a bit newer to the library. She's still really excited to get in and do the best job that she can. She has a general knowledge of the library. She knows how to walk around it. She knows where to find things, but she hasn't read every book. And I walk in and I just ask them both a simple question. I am looking for Shakespeare's the first words he ever wrote in his first book. The old librarian, I should have given them names, but the older librarian, he just closes his eyes, thinks for a second, and says, it was "'Twaseth thy moon." Now, don't fact check me. I don't actually remember. I really should have looked this up beforehand. But let's say, hypothetically, that Shakespeare's first quote was "'Twaseth thy moon." He knows it off the top of his head because he read every book in the library. But this other young gal, she says, "Ooh, I don't know. But what I can do is I know where to look." So what she does is she runs up the stairs and she rushes over to the section where she knows to find Shakespeare and more theatrical plays. And she sees William Shakespeare's book sitting there. So she grabs it off the shelf, opens it to the first page. "'Twaseth thy moon." Also, again, still not his first quote, probably. But he reads that. She reads that and comes back to me and says, Shakespeare's first quote was "'Twaseth thy moon." Now, what you just saw was the older librarian. That is a traditional LLM. It's just read the entirety of the internet. It knows all of this information in the back of its head, and it's able to pull it up just like that. The younger librarian emphasizes a retrieval augmented generation architecture, a RAG architecture, because what she did is she might be an LLM that went out and found more information. So what if there's new books in the library? The older librarian might not have read them in time, but the newer librarian was able to go and find that information, even though he hasn't read it. The older librarian hasn't. But here's the specific thing that we mentioned beforehand. If I go back a few slides, I mentioned right here, pass to LLM for context validation. Now, in this example, what happens if William Shakespeare's book was missing, or it was misplaced, or it was checked out? Well, we're going to have the issue of the younger librarian is going to go up there and look for this book. She's going to look for it and see it's gone. It's just missing. So she's very adamant. This is one of her first few days on the job. She really wants to respond and get me an answer. So what she does is, and this is a math term, she finds the nearest neighbor of William Shakespeare and sees this book here, which just so happens to be a Dr. Seuss book. I don't have a fun image for that, but she opens it up, flips to the first page and sees, green eggs and ham. Also not the first page of that book itself, but nonetheless. She comes back very confidently. She starts walking down those steps, very confident in what she said, because she has to be confident. She's young. She started at this job. But before she can get to me, we implemented this technology where it's just a content filter, context validation. The manager is standing there before she comes back to tell me the answer of green eggs and ham, and asks, hey, quick question. First, what was the user looking for? Okay, William Shakespeare's first book, or first quote. What did you come back with? Dr. Seuss's first line. And he's immediately able, before she comes back and confidently tells me the wrong thing, to say, no. If we don't have this information, don't respond with the wrong information. It's a filter. It blocks it from hallucinating to you. And there's a lot of other interesting techniques. If you want to explore more, you can look into something called RAG Triad. But that's kind of the approach. So, Christian, can you go back to the app and kind of show our implementation of this now, of this marketing approach? Because I want to see what ads I get.
Yeah, of course. Awesome. So just for demonstration purposes, let's actually go back, rerun things, and let's select the bad apple again. Why not? Give it a go to see how much time it loads. I also want to showcase that, as we built this within Project IDX, we have to think about all the different, actions the users might take. So as you can see, there you have spinning loaders, you have different things that were put into place in the back end of the front end and in the back end of the actual logic that Zach was just describing. So
yeah, I love that. So
exactly
what it did is it took the information it got back for the rating, the pros and the cons, and then empowered the LLM response with the information from, it looks like it got it from Aiko's Acorn Market to create its own personalized ad. So I know we don't have as much time, but I kind of want to read it out loud. Oh yeah, that's where it was pulling the direct flyer. So it was pulling up information from the weekly flyers that might be just coming in every week from our partners. So if you go back to the ad. So an apple a day keeps that. I like that apple away. We heard your 1-star review. Bruised, wrinkled, and closer to compost than cuisine. While that apple might make a great Halloween decoration, it won't satisfy your hunger. Forget projectile fruit. At Aiko's Acorn Market, our crisp apples, perfect, and that's where it's quoting. It's pulling directly from the flyer. Crisp apples, perfect for pies, cobblers, and snacks. Oh, forget projectile fruit at this area. No hazmat suits required. This week, enjoy 20% off all citrus fruits, adding a burst of sunshine to your autumn. Visit Aiko's Acorn Market at an address, Acorn Hut, and rediscover the joy of fresh produce. All right.
That's awesome.
Actually kind of fun.
Yeah. Awesome. So, I think last thing we could show so that the audience can see is that, when we were developing this during the 24 hours, we had to accelerate all the different types of things that could pop up. Like Zach showed the different 3 options, right? So here we have a photo that doesn't have any produce, right? And we were like, we have to detect this, right? Like the end user has to, hey, no produce was detected. All of this is being done with Gemini, and it was developed with Gemini in an accelerated manner, right? So if we actually give it a good produce, you might actually see that this one looks actually very good. Now I actually want an apple. You can actually see that the rating is actually pretty good. It understands what looks good, what doesn't look good. So we were actually surprised that even though we prompted it to be a food critic, to be very harsh on the actual image you shared of the produce, we found an apple that gave it 5 stars. It This was actually harder than it looks, but we got lucky with this specific green apple.
Can you see
and
the
again,
bulk upload actually? I saw a picture
Yeah.
where it said 2 different apples.
exactly. And then the last option is that, like, if you're in a grocery store and you just want to take a picture with your phone and you actually want to see, okay,
But
what
actually, can
apple
you
is the
change
best
it
one?
to the other one?
What was that?
Could you change it over to the one where there's only 2 apples, just for quick simplicity's
Oh,
sake?
yeah. That's a good
I
one.
think we might not be able to see the bounding box it draws.
Yeah. So 1 sec.
Oh
Let
yeah,
me
there we go.
actually go
Actually,
to-
that's the point. It did the bounding box from the other one.
From the other one, yeah.
I was running into issues where the bounding box sometimes, if there was too much there, it just
there we go.
it just did not figure it out. So here's where you can laugh, because this is really the startup side of things. It was able to give a good reasoning, saying the one on the left appeared to be fresher, firmer, and freer of blemishes. But we just didn't have time to be able to debug and test of, okay, Gemini is not drawing the bounding box correct. There's my test box in green, and then the blue box of what Gemini drew, kind of. But I know we're running short on time for the last few things. So if you can go back to my slides. This is the time that I want to potentially seek investors now from you guys. Now, we're running this very quickly on a client that's not expecting to take huge loads of audience members. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this slide, and I'm actually going to add in a QR code. So if you scan this, if you're watching this as a video, it will not work. But for potentially a few people right now, it may or may not work. This is running off of Project IDX, testing it out real quick. If you want to try to upload a picture of fruit or veggies near you right now, you can try to do it. If you're one of the first few people, it might have worked. If you're one of the later people who just scanned this, it probably has crashed by this point. So I can see GET requests from people. Oh, God. So I'm expecting the app to crash in a few seconds based on, I don't know how many people are watching. But if I look to the back end, yep, I'm seeing people errors and lots of people trying to get it. So I don't know if it's already crashed from too many people or not, but hopefully this was a good enough investment pitch for everyone to potentially buy into our startup and invest in us now. But that is pretty much everything we had. So I'm going to pass it back to Aaron. Thank you very much. We will have a session for questions, I believe, after.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. I'm going to give you a minute or two break to hopefully grab some water after that. That was a lot of fun. Loved the demos and the real life examples. So thank you both. So I'll give you a quick breather. So everyone, welcome back. Before we head into Q&A, just had a couple of items to run through with you all. So the first is the Google for Startups Cloud Program. So again, for those of you who are new or may have missed the end of last week's sessions, we're really excited about this. This is our one of our core programs for startups. And so as you begin this exciting Gen AI learning journey with our speakers and our experts this week and the coming weeks, we're confident that you're going to want to try a lot of the products and solutions that are referenced throughout, many of which Zach and Christian covered today. So if you're a startup, you can apply for up to $350,000 in cloud credits via this program, and you can start building Gen AI solutions for your business right away. So we have various support offers for every different stage of startup, including even a $300 free trial tier, a $2,000 start tier, and then additional credits to support growth and scaling. We also have tailored programs for AI first and Web3 companies. So to learn more, to apply, please scan the QR code that you see on your screen, or you can also visit the link as well. And we have pinned this in the Q&A section below the video. It will also be included on the resources tab on our main program landing page, and will be in our follow-up emails as well. So again, many places for you to find more information. So the next thing is just calling out, for those of you who joined us in Q1 and Q2, perhaps for this program, we heard your feedback and we're really excited and thrilled to announce that we do have a dedicated Discord community channel. So again, you can scan this QR code or use the link on your screen. This is really just for you, your teams, to continue the conversation with fellow attendees and peers. We know that the chat space ends after this live session. The Q&A space isn't available. So this is a way for you to continue to connect and keep the conversation going. So go ahead and join that. We do also have Google Cloud and Google moderators on there to help with questions. All right. And let's invite Zach and Christian back on. We will run through just a couple of questions really quick. Hopefully you guys got some water. I know you had a long presentation. All right, so first question. How are images measured as tokens?
Awesome. Yes. So great question. I think I can take this one. So when it comes to images, particularly, there's so in the backend of processing images, when it comes to these models, you actually have, I believe it was called like in the example of Imagen, it's called like the vision transformer, right? So you can think of the this encoder of the image or a network of encoders that actually needs to figure out, okay, how do I first encode? How do I quanticize this image into like tokens that are representative, which means that if you have, for example, an image that is 256 by 256 pixels, right? It tries to find out what part of the image, what part of the pixels has representative data, and then creates a chunk out of that. So it takes out a chunk, and then that chunk can represent one token or two tokens, right? It all depends on what the actual transformer finds relevant within the actual context of the image and the actual context of the text when it's combined via both text and images, right? So why does that matter? Is because when it comes to processing all of this data, images can be huge, images can be small, but you need to be as fast and require the less amount of memory as possible, right? So because you're processing raw pixels, so at the end of the day, you only need to grab what's relevant in the image, depending on what the text or the prompt that was given by it, right? So as Zach mentioned earlier, like the nearest neighbor, if your prompt has clouds, then it'll probably take a chunk out of the top of the image wherever it finds like sky or cloud related things. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for that.
Can I add a side note just in reference to the QR code? I think it died within the first 3 seconds of people scanning.
Oh no.
Which is fun. So I was waiting for that moment to happen because I knew it would happen. So if anyone does actually want to use this code, we're going to have a GitHub link. So if you go to search Google Cloud Platform, Generative AI, there's a repo where under Gemini/use cases, next week on Tuesday, it should be going live. All of this code with a magic link that you can literally click it once and it'll deploy it all to Google Cloud Platform. And if you didn't get to play with it today, you can play with it then, and you can take the code and you can modify it, and you can follow the steps that it has to be able to explore around with it. Because, oh God, I think I saw like a couple, like I think at least 30 images appear before I just said crash. But I'll let you go back to it, Karen.
Oh man.
Thanks, Zach. All right, let's try and get through a few more questions. We had a lot today. So the next one up asks, generally the image models are not good at adding text to the image. How do you prompt to have proper text on pictures? And this is from Garvit Mathur. Hopefully I didn't butcher name pronunciation.
Awesome. Actually, that's a very, very, very good question, because one of the first things we wanted to do with our Cherry Picker AI logo was actually put Cherry Picker on the bottom, right? And even as I was exploring this, as I was communicating my ideas with other AI ML specialists, like the actual best practices when it comes to adding text to an image is that you have to be very specific with the prompt, in the sense that, for example, if you want to add, did they add an example? No. But I can give you an example. So if you simply, let's take the classic developer example, hello world, right? And you want to add that to a very specific image, you have to be very specific in the phrasing as to one of the best practices is adding quotes in the text you actually want to add. So like start quote, end quote, that's going to be the text that's going to be added to the image. And then you also want to specify the color of the font, the size of the font, in which section of the photo you actually want it to be placed. And then things like, for example, you know that images sometimes have captions and it's at the bottom. It understands that. You might have to be very specific, but like when it comes to adding text to and prompting to add text to images, you have to be very specific. And the specifics are around what it means or what are the attributes that text have. So earlier we saw attributes of photography. We saw ambience that goes into color grading. We saw the styling. We saw the dramatic effect. So those were photography based, attributes. When it comes to text, you have to think about all the attributes of modifying text, right? So the font color, as I mentioned, the font size, all of that, and the placement within the image. Yeah. And again, keep it simple, and then keep adding iteratively to the prompt until you get the results you're looking for. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Christian. Zach, anything to add, or should I keep moving?
I think he did perfect. He focused on the images so well, so all good.
Perfect. All right. So this one is from Fernando Luca de Tina Smith. And bear with me, it's a bit of a longer question. So is there a specific sequence to use when prompting Gemini for different use cases? If so, is there a guide and where? So meaning in the photo example that where you first specified the main subject, then the background, and later the setting and attributes of the photo. When generating for finances, docs, etc., is there an order such as system instructions, persona, constraints that will generate better results based on the training data?
Oh, okay, that's a very great question. So let me see how I can answer this. I guess I can go by order. It's a bad question, but very good question. So let me see. The first one is there any specific sequence to use when prompting for different use cases? The answer, to be honest, is yes and no. It depends. Yeah, I don't like to answer it depends, but it actually does depend on the use case. But you went into later on in the question is like system prompts, persona, and constraints. So if you think about it, system prompts don't necessarily have to be ordered. They just have to exist so that the model understands what it needs to do with the results. So as Zach mentioned earlier, when you're thinking about the evaluation or the validation piece of the result that were generated by these models, the system instructions actually help you a lot so that the model can actually understand, okay, it's looking to the results should be in JSON format, for example, right? That's a very common system instructions. And now we're building even more tools like function calling and different ways of structuring the results of these models. But when it comes to persona and the different constraints, it really doesn't matter like the order. It just needs to be part of the prompt, right? And what actually matters when it comes to ordering is what you want it to do in the sense of reasoning, right? Like I first want you to do this. So I want you to have this persona act as this person. And if that persona has two tasks, does those two tasks or those two objectives, does it matter as a human? You have to ask yourself, like, hey, does it matter the order of these tasks? If the model does something first and then it does the other, so model does task B first instead of A first, will it ruin the end results, right? You have to ask yourself as a human. If it does, then you have to tell the model, hey, do task A first and then do task B second, right? So to answer the there's another question of if there is a guide. There actually is. I believe, let me double check. You can like Google search Gemini prompting guide. And we have one of the top links should be different ways that it's like a quick start, right? Let me see if it's this one. Yeah, so we have multiple quick starts or prompting guides 101 type of documents, PDFs, that go into prompting within Google Workspace, prompting within Gemini specifically. And there's lots of tips and tricks and best practices within our Google Cloud documentation. And then let me see if I answer all the questions there.
I think you answered all the points on that, actually.
Yeah, I think so. If not, again, we do recommend you go into the documentation because there are lots of examples and best practices that do matter when it comes to prompting.
Awesome. All right. I think we have time for at least one more. So let's see how far we can get. So what are best practices for data security since large volumes of data sets are consumed?
I can take that one, and hopefully I can answer that one in two different parts. So we might have time for another question if possible. But in terms of best practice for data security, the first thing I think of is there's two different approaches. One, the traditional storing of the data that obviously you want to probably use, even though there's all this Gen AI hype and all these other things going on, you still want to use a dedicated database, like to store the information, like any other app. That's just like always follow traditional practices that have been built in from the ground up over decades of work for data security. It all applies to all these LLMs and all these multimodal models later. And in terms of Gemini, when you're thinking of data security, the first thing is pick a model that one, you can trust where the data is being run. Like I wouldn't recommend using Gemini Consumer or a ChatGPT or a Claude direct platform where it's the consumer provided option. I recommend going into something like Google Cloud Platform and utilizing your own version where you'll copy the model, a frozen version of that model, into your tenant that you can use. You can make it malleable. You can pass in your data and you can trust that it stays within the realm of your environment. So if you're passing very sensitive information, it stays within your environment. You don't have to worry about the model training on it because it can't escape your environment. That's the two different approaches I would take for like the best practice on it.
Awesome. Thank you, Zach. All right. Time for one more really quick.
Yeah.
Last one. All right. So I am building an AI product for retail and the e-commerce industry. Can you explain how Gemini's multimodal capabilities handle diverse data inputs and how I can optimize this for real-time product recommendations?
Yeah, and I was actually wanting to get to that one because that's a fun one for me because how you handle different data inputs as I'm reading the question and optimize for it. So if you're getting lots of different photos or a lot of different data and you're trying to do a recommendation system, it's important to structuralize the outputs into some format. You might be getting lots of different photos and lots of different information, but you want to create a structured schema. So in Gemini or these multimodal models, there's two different approaches. And I actually will, in the background, share my screen too, because there's something I can show if I share this tab. So if you actually can see my screen, so ignore this part. This part is not important. This is using Google AI Studio. But what is important is if you were to create a prompt to be able to ask, okay, I'm going to get photos of lots of different dresses or something, you can turn it on a MIME type, which allows it to respond only in JSON. And then you can tell it to create out a schema. So this one was create a story, a bedtime story for my kid. And what it would do is it'll create a story title and it'll make it a required output. And you can apply the characters and you can extract pieces of information you want the model to respond every single time. So you can create a structured schema to allow the same output every single time, which allows you to get diverse pieces of information received, but get a structured, usable output. Because even if you're getting lots of different data in, unless you get something that's structured out, you can't use it into a recommendation system or all these other models.
Yeah. Before we drop, like, can I add to the third question? I think the third question was pretty a good one, and there's a lot of things you can touch upon it. But I mentioned earlier about Google searching like prompt design or prompt guides for Gemini. Can we share our screen? Yeah, there we go. Thank you so much. Just want to share that again within our documentation, there are a lot of things with prompt design, prompt engineering that you can go through. You can figure out, what exactly is the right approach or strategy for the specific use case. You can even see here prompting strategies. And one thing I also like to reiterate is that not only does like system instruction, the constraints and everything like that does play a part, but one of the most important things, and Zach, to your point, right? Like when you're building a rack system where you're trying to ground these models into very specific information, is having examples, right? Like having what you are expecting the model to actually deliver based on previous, work or based on previous actions, right? So, like to answer the third question a little bit more, and to answer the fifth question on like real-time recommendations, is you also want to figure out, hey, what is the right data this model needs to have so that it can actually be quicker? And there's many things that go around in the back end, right? Like you have to benchmark different models. So for example, Flash is built so that it's way quicker, but it might not be as accurate, or might have different use cases that do better.
Yeah, in our repo that we'll post, that's going to be posting next Tuesday, we'll include links to a lot of this stuff so that you can do your own research and learn about it. And I also look forward to people posting on LinkedIn their own tests of the app and getting really fun roastings of the information, which, again, we didn't have a load balancer or anything like that for this one. So it died immediately. This was just running in a local environment for testing it. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you guys for the time and answering the questions, and the time for the session today. Super fun and engaging. Lots of awesome comments in the chat and the QA. Only thing before we close is just final reminder for Thursday session on November 7th. So same time, this will be scaling Gen AI, so advanced patterns and production techniques. We've got some amazing speakers as well, so make sure to join us. Thank you, Zach and Christian. Really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.